Okay, it's Derek Hansen with John Abreu at Derek M. Hansen.
At Real Coach John.
That's right. So we're on a ski lift here in British Columbia, and we're talking a bit about doing, what we did is we decided, okay, we're going to go snowboarding, and by no means are we any good at it, but we did some activation protocols with electrical muscle stimulation just to see, you know, if we kind of get our muscles in tune. And I was saying to John as I'm going down here, I think it's working because it's very isometric, eccentric, like he was saying, and John's been working with some snowboarding athletes here at the highest level, and we're sharing some of our thoughts. And just, you know, doing that beforehand, doing the EMS beforehand I found was very useful for me, even though I'm like a novice.
Well, I'm equally bad at snowboarding, but what I can tell you is that, yeah, we did the activation protocols, and I just feel like everything fires a little bit more efficiently. And obviously, like, having that capacity to just be able to turn fibers on and off as you manage eccentrically is very important for you to be able to sustain a full run. So, you know, despite the fact that I may not look like I'm doing well, at least I feel like I'm riding a lot smoother.
He looks a lot better than me. And the interesting thing with these types of sports is that there really isn't a lot of opportunity, even for us. Like, we didn't do a warm-up. We kind of walked over to the slope out from the parking lot and then just put the bindings on and just went for it. And it felt pretty good, actually. I'm pretty impressed. So
yeah, with my guys, like, we'll go through like a little bit of something just to get them warmed up. Like, especially if you get to some of these bigger ski resorts, the chairlift, the ride up, that's a long time to be sitting down and then trying to be hitting some more tricks or handling a pretty steep terrain. But yeah, I still think that there's something to be said about it. Like, the effects for me were reasonably profound, I guess. Mind you, I'm not performing at the same caliber as some of these guys, but with that being said, maybe these guys who perform at a higher level, maybe they don't need as much either, because they're just wired to go almost right away.
Yeah, just a couple of reps at, I don't know, 10 seconds per contraction. Take your 50 seconds in between, pretty high intensity, and then you're good. For us, we're not hitting anywhere near the velocities these guys are hitting, and we're not doing jumps or anything like that. So it's a different world for us, but still, I mean, if we're getting effects, I would think the better athlete you are, the more profound the effects would be.
For sure.
Just like we found with track athletes, football players, soccer players.
Even just before a lift, like, you feel definitely more ready to go. You do feel like things are firing a little bit better. You feel like that the timing, intermuscular or intramuscular, it just feels a lot smoother, right? So.
Yeah, so the sun's going down here, and we're going to do some night boarding, and we're gonna talk a bit more about our experience here. But I like having John here because he's been spending more time on the slopes with some pretty high-level snowboarding athletes. So this is pretty interesting for us to get out here and kind of lay it out there. So we're gonna have to get off this chairlift pretty soon, but. This is pretty cool. I think we're going to do Strength Coaches on Ski Lifts podcast here, and but we have I don't know if you can see the view behind us, but it's pretty spectacular. So we're just enjoying ourselves on a Monday here and taking it all in. Brought my kids up too, so it's a good day. So we'll talk a bit more. We're going to experiment a little bit more with this and
get our runs in as well.
Definitely. So. Okay, so we're on the bigger chair here, done a couple more runs, and John and I were commenting on how my kids are way better than me and John after probably way fewer runs. And what were you saying about that, John? Well,
I just think, like, your system, right, and we keep talking about this idea of signal and noise, right, and I think that as you get older, you acquire more noise in your signal. So it's like getting a new computer. When you've got a brand new computer, everything's running well, you install software, the software is really fast, and then you have a computer that is maybe 10 years old. Even if you try to run the same software, it's going to be choppier, slower. You picked up a couple bugs and viruses. So I don't know, that's something that I just made up right now and makes sense in my head.
Would you say they may have cleaner pathways?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can feel like when I get on my board, I feel like I'm almost struggling to recruit the right muscles. And when I see them do it, I don't see that same apprehension, maybe it's just fear, but being cautious, being older, but at the same time, I just don't feel like I'm getting it down as quickly. It's crazy.
It probably does have a little bit to do with fear because you've fallen, you've taken some hits before, whereas maybe they haven't to the same degree. But yeah, like there's other programs in there that are interfering, I think, with your capacity to learn something new, right? So even we know this even from somebody that tries to learn how to speak a language. You kind of go back to learning using the syntax of the language that you're already fluent in. So I think it works the same way for motor patterns.
Yeah, and if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, you're retaining that accent, right? You can't shake the accent, right? Yeah. So maybe I have too many accents in my boarding skills here.
That's right.
This is nice. Ooh, that's a nice view. Let's check this out. Carving it up with the boards. You're relatively new to the sport, as am I, but you work with some of the highest level athletes in this sport in the world. What are you getting from, one, what you see at a high performance level, and what you're feeling and what you're seeing with what we're doing?
Like, what am I seeing in terms of what they're doing for training?
Yeah, what they're doing for training, or just what their abilities are. Like, I mean, obviously it's very specific to what they do, and I'm not going to, I go still lift. I think I lift pretty heavy. I run, I jump, I do all sorts of things, even at my ripe old age. But first time I hit the slopes in a long time on the board, I felt handicapped. Like I felt like I just wasn't firing properly. I just didn't have the coordination.
Well, so what I'm seeing is, so I'll tell you, the discipline that I work with is called slopestyle. So those are the guys that are, a little crazy. They're the ones that you see at X Games doing all the big jumps. And what I see from their just general abilities is that they're very fast twitch. They have got a lot of strength and power. And most of that power and strength that they've acquired is actually not from the gym. It's just from practicing their sport and having to manage landings and negotiate gravity while doing 60-foot jumps, right? But most of these guys are wired to be fast twitch, which gives them the ability to perform these rotations. And they also have a decent amount of strength, which, although they may not be able to express in the weight room, they still have it there. Like in any sort of test, like we did an isometric mid-thigh pull, just because it kind of takes out a little bit of the skill elements involved with like a back squat, or as you would see in a back squat or something like that. So that was interesting to me. And then what I'm thinking the exact same way as you. Like all I do for training is very general stuff. Like I run, I jump, I sprint, I lift. And when I started to learn how to snowboard, it was fatiguing, right? Obviously you don't have the correct coordination on how to manage gravity. There's no way that you can replicate that, right?
No, even if you did specific energy system training in dry land scenarios, I can't see
even
it.
If you did like slow eccentrics, because you feel like since managing your way down a hill is all eccentric, I don't think that you're getting the same level of activation, because the contractions last for so long, and there is a level of management left leg to right leg as you turn and that sort of thing. So it's not the same. Like the biomechanics of the movement just are not the same. But what I did find was that being in that general decent shape, I didn't fatigue as much as people expected me to. I wasn't as sore the next day.
Sure.
I was able to handle a top to bottom up in Whistler, which is a pretty demanding hill, and at least for a first time, I should say. So yeah, I was a little tired afterwards, but I think that if anything, that strengthens the argument that things need to be more general, especially with a sport where it's not like soccer or football or rugby, where you run, you catch, you maybe make some contact with people. I think actually training for those sports, the way that the training should be prescribed is more specific, dependent on tactics and positions and that sort of thing. Whereas a sport like slopestyle is so specific in its own skill set that the training has to be more general.
Yeah, and all I'm thinking right now is my ass is really cold as we sit here, but I agree. I mean, just like, sprinting, like people trying to lift more weight to run faster, it's not going to happen that way. You have to be focusing on a specific task that you do in your sport, and then layer on some degree of general training to increase general abilities that feed back into your sport.
Right, and you will get a little bit of that energy system tolerance, demand tolerance, but nothing will be the same until you do the sport.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's go down for another run and try to internalize what we're doing here.